To be more creative and innovative. And one of the keys to unlocking your potential is an entrepreneurial mindset. I like to say it's permission granted. No one is successful overnight.
Keep on keeping on.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at in the world. Thanks for being here on day 18 of 31 Days to Pad It 2. Almost 2 lines. Yes, it's great to have you here. And today I wanted to start off with one of the things that's happening in my life is I'm starting to look at ways I've been overly critical or judgmental, or how my criticalness and my critical nature and judgment can hold me back and undermine my relationships with people I'm trying to work with. This realization came to me last week during a coaching session with my coach and mentor, one of them, Bill Handy. I was still trying to get Bill on the show. He'd be an amazing addition. And it came to my attention through just questions that Bill was asking me, the part of what's been holding me back is my critical nature, my judgmental nature, or my judgmental side as it relates to engaging and working with people. We all have this, and some people are better at holding it back or managing their critical nature. Criticalness and judgment hold you back from being creative, ultimately, undermines relationships, and doesn't allow you to reach your full potential as quickly or as effectively, and can hold you back time and time again from reaching your goals and objectives. And so I want to talk a little bit about this and give you some real examples of how I'm trying to work on this in real time and how I'm reprogramming my brain to be less critical, to eventually remove critical thinking about people from my, or judgment of people or situations out of my mind. So I'm more free to experience the moment as it is and understand it with more clarity as I go forward. And so I'm going to give you this example. So I have a challenge where when I'm working with people, I get really critical of how things are done. I have a vision. I want to see it done a certain way. Within that vision, I then become really critical with people. I get as critical as critiquing emails that people send out. I'm critical in terms of whether or not somebody is doing something the way that I want it to be done. I'm critical about how people talk to people. I'm critical about a lot of things that I didn't realize I was as critical or judgmental as I am until last week. Here's what I've been doing since last week to start reprogramming my brain and thinking differently, realizing this is holding me back from reaching my full potential, from reaching my overarching goals, whatever that compelling goal may be. And I did this yesterday. So this doesn't have to be just in a work environment. This is practice that takes place in your personal life, work life, and any other personal activities you may be doing. But the criticalness and the talking in our heads that prevents us from moving forward, or the subconscious and unconscious bias that's there. We're going to have Risha Grant on this show. She is a specialist, a world speaker, global speaker on and author on unconscious bias. And these are the type of things that are holding us back, this unconsciousness that we have. Here's what I did yesterday. Yesterday, I'm cooking up a meal. I'm making dinner. My wife, Seema, says, hey, I want to take a break right now. It just wasn't the best time. We had Zane running around doing things, and he was trying to go outside. And so I was critical. I was like, this is not a good time for that. There was really no discussion. And I could see it upset Seema. After I got done making the salad and dinner, I went and talked to her, and I apologized and said, look, I realized that I was being overly critical in that situation. What I could have done differently is said, hey, look, this is probably not the best time. Maybe there's an opportunity to take a break with Zane when I get done with the salad. We get this situated, the meal's ready to go, and you get Zane's happy, and then I'll switch, and then you can take a break. I didn't have a conversation, so I did. That's what I did. I apologized. I said, I won't do that again. And if I do that again, please do make sure to bring it up and that we had this discussion so that I can make sure that I'm learning to behave and interact in a different and more effective way. The key in that is I made the intention, I actually apologized for the action that was so critical and it wasn't necessary at all. I then gave a solution of what I'm going to do next time this happens. And if I forget, which is likely to happen, then I have a mechanism that I've given Seema to then come talk to me and say, look, this is something we discussed. This is a critical and judgmental nature of yourself, and that I know you're trying to work on that. So you got to enroll people and get their support. This, again, is not easy stuff. It's like super hyper awareness. I've gotten to the point where I'm engaging with, and what I've done is I've called up a number of people and I've apologized to them. Hey, look it, I realize now that my actions and my critical judgmental nature is holding back our relationship, that we are not able to move forward as effectively, especially in my closest relationships, starting there. And then articulate how I'm going to behave differently and how I need their help to support me in the process of behaving differently. This is how I reprogram my brain and change my behavior. So I'm not doing it alone. I get those people who are close to me, who in some way I have been critical or judgmental and perhaps have limited their performance because now they're thinking in the back of their heads, adding to their already critical judgmental nature, more mine, which is not necessary. So what I've started doing, and I'm doing this differently now going forward, with any of the people I work with, making sure they understand I am working to change my critical, judgmental, historical behavior, thinking, and move to a place where it's supportive, promotive, empowering, not undermining. This will then grow more relationships because more relationships will respond positively to my shifting behavior, my more positive behavior as I move forward. So I wanted to share that with you because this is like a in the moment, real time reprogramming process. And I'm also trying to understand what are the steps that I take and how does this work for me to be successful. I see we have somebody here. Is that right, Amy? Who do we have? I can't hear anything. Hello? Good afternoon. Is this Albert?
Yeah, this is Albert from Uganda, Changwale Refugee Settlement.
Albert, so good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I'm also happy to meet you guys here and to hear something from you.
Well, it looks like another beautiful day in Uganda, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Hey, what question do you have for me?
Thank you for allowing me to raise my question. First question, the question I have I wanted to know more about your work and support. How do you work with young people, mostly here in Africa or in Uganda?
The question is in regards to my historical work or work up to date in Uganda, in Africa?
Yes, Uganda.
Yeah, that's really easy. Well, maybe not. Yeah, I've been working in Africa now probably 7-8 years. 18 African countries I personally worked in. We've run accelerators in over 20 countries. We have 2 women entrepreneurship community centers, accelerators, incubators in Africa, Kenya and Zambia. Zambia has been renamed WEAC, I think it's called now. And so we've had a lot of experience working with, that is through Griffin Works, working with women, youth, anybody and everybody who wants to start a business. We pretty much try to engage in our activities. I think the key differentiator of our programming over other programming or other methodologies that are out there in terms of helping empower to build businesses is that we overarching, it's not really a business building program as much as that's the hook. It's really about empowering 100% agency in people we work with so that they have more control over their own lives and their own destiny. And so what we're really training is empowerment techniques, tools to help them reach their full potential, tools to unlock this hidden opportunities they have. And business building, from my experience and from the experience of many other people, is like this key livelihoods element to get people going forward and break out of wherever they're at. And so we use and leverage business building and entrepreneurship as a way to create systematic change, empower people to reach their full potential, or as we like to say, igniting human potential. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. But I still have some question about that too.
Sure.
I've been looking on the social medias whereby you have been working with young entrepreneurs all over the world, mostly in Pakistan, whereby you rewarded some entrepreneurs in something with the seed capital to scale up their businesses. So I was wondering if that will be the same here in Africa, mostly here in Uganda, that is have been part of that capacity building, and also we are training some trainings with you guys here around. I was asking myself if that will happen in here.
Okay, I think I got part of that. Amy, can you just sort of summarize what you heard? Because I was closing my eyes and...
I think what Albert is saying is that through social media engagement, he's noticed that you've had some programs, other programs that Griffin Works does, where there have been challenges like Startup Academy, Startup Cup, where there have been awards at the end. They're of monetary value, and I think he's asking more about that. If you could go into that a little bit.
Ah, I see. Yeah. So each one of our programs, for instance, the Startup Cup that's running in Pakistan, it's 7 years now it's been running in Pakistan. It grew from 1 or 3 cities into 7. So it's the nation's largest acceleration program. Each Startup Cup, each Startup Academy, each program develops their own idea or own outcomes in terms of the award celebration. Pakistan's has grown over time and has become really significant and large, but again, it's 7 years. We encourage all of our organizers that we train, 72 countries at this point, that we believe that the prize money is not the goal. The goal is to empower people with the tools, the resources to understand how to self-fund, how to bootstrap their business forward, create revenue as rapidly as possible, and then grow that revenue, and so that they can self-fund their business, particularly in areas that you're living in, like Uganda or other countries. Pakistan is really trying hard to become like the next Silicon Valley. I think they have their first unicorn. That would be over $1 billion. That's your cue, Amy. I couldn't help it. But it's true. It just happened like 2 weeks ago that they got their first unicorn. And so I think that you can't compare different programs to what we're doing in Uganda, because ultimately less than 1%, 0.8% of all businesses globally receive any kind of traditional funding, 0.8%. Most of those businesses that are receiving that funding are businesses that have had some kind of exit, or the entrepreneurs have had some success, or there's some kind of reduction in risk from the investors, the traditional people that invest in those businesses. So when you look at 0.8% of all businesses globally around the world receiving any kind of traditional funding, your odds are pretty close to 0. So you got to come up with an alternative approach. Now, in Pakistan, as an example, something like 750 to 800 businesses will compete in an extreme build-a-business, 48-hour extreme build-a-business workshop weekend kind of environment, which you were part of. From those, then I guess approximately 200 or 175 of those will make the top 25 and compete. When you come out on top, you're getting 1, 2, or 3 nationally receiving any kind of prize money. That fits nicely into the 0.8% of people who receive any kind of money from their work, and it's a competitive it's a much more competitive process than we drove in Uganda. I hope that helps answer that. But each organization we work with develops their own strategy around how much funding there'll be, if there is any. And we encourage no funding. The knowledge, the skills, the tools, the method for building a business and generating money now.
Okay, so just to reiterate, Sean, you're saying you don't need funding. You need revenue. And so
That's right. Yeah, well, and Albert knows this because I was there. We saw each other a while ago. I don't remember when, but that's the message that we continually give. And so, again, each organization has their way. We're more intimately involved now in what's happening in Uganda, and so we're much more driven by self-funding. Self-funding is the mechanism for you to grow your success. And the key here is the more revenue you generate, the more fundable you become. That's the key here. So the more revenue you generate, the more fundable you become. And even big businesses or businesses that are scalable, that are investable, that meet all these limited criteria that investors have, even those are now more likely to get investment based upon having revenue. And investors are looking for revenue-based businesses now to invest in over those that were just an idea or a concept and has no money tied to it. So there is no better way to create self-funding than revenue. That can be from a job, that can be from selling things. There's there's lots of ways to create revenue and bootstrap your business. I'll pause there.
Albert, do you have thoughts on what he's just said?
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. I'm getting you, and thank you for the explanation of all of this. Only the suggestion I could have, if I'm allowed, it's like if like to know to have this network with the organization or with you, it's very important for us. I think also you have some more networks which can also encourage young people to do their businesses and their activities, like by applying for awards or applying for some opportunities in the US or all over the world. So when like you find those opportunities, I was requesting maybe you involve us to apply and try our luck and see if we can grow up in mind, also competing with different people from other countries and the other continent, have that experience, and also build our capacity as we are getting some resources from other organizations which can fund us.
So I think that I'm gonna repeat this, and this is for everybody who's watching as well. Funding is not the focus. If you focus on funding, you're missing the mark. Because remember, when you're funding and you're trying to raise money, it's out of your control, completely out of your control. You have no control over it because the people with the money control the decision, not you. You want to bring control back to you. And to bring that control, you have to find assets and resources in your own control that you can manage. This could be selling an item you have that would generate some money. I'm notorious for asking people, nice phone, are you willing to sell that phone? It might be $100 right there. That's $100 of funding, get a less quality phone. You got some kind of vehicle, sell it. I've sold so many vehicles in my life for funding purposes, many in a heartbreaking situation. I'm now 0 cars. And so being able to sell things, having a job, that's money, that's revenue. You reinvesting that money from your job into your business, which you're doing on the side until it generates enough revenue that you can quit your job and you now have a better job, your own created job. It can be from selling things, the money you make from the selling. It could be loans from friends or family. It could be it could be bartering land. If you're growing something, you could get land for no cost and pay based upon the harvest and the money you make and redistribute some percentage back to them. So there's literally an endless number of ways that you can create revenue. But what I would say in terms of what I believe, and I believe this strongly, Albert, I believe you have a competitive advantage over a lot of people around the world, particularly here in the US, because you are driven and are hungry in a way that most people can't, a lot of people can't relate to. So that hunger, that desire, that drive gives you competitive advantage, and you want to leverage that. You also want to leverage the networks you can from Alight. As you were saying, but I want to be really clear here. Alight has a lot of different mechanisms within those settlements, particularly Chingwali, where you're at. And I would be working with them to understand what other organizations are providing grants or support for whatever it may be, because you're positioned very well, having grown your business, having grown revenue, to be able then to position yourself for some kind of money that might be available to you as a refugee in that environment. I would be looking for every mechanism, every country, every organization that's there. Don't be limited by Alight, that may have a mechanism to provide you some amount of funding. I would be looking for some cash, I'd say extra cash. I'd be looking for mechanisms that make it as easy as possible for you to get that money, because sometimes money tied to government money may sound really nice, but then there's all these forms you got to fill out, all of these expectations, and it's not the easiest thing. But what I know right now is that there is money flowing into the refugee environments, and having gone through the program we've gone through, having created revenue, having shown you can progress and move your business and grow it forward, you're positioned well for identifying some mechanism to secure extra cash and money. But that's all highly localized for you. It's highly localized for most people. But that's what I would say. So, you know, use your ingenuity and your determination and your drive to then get your ear down to the ground and find out where's some opportunities to maybe expand your cash pile, because you've been able to identify some organizations that are or groups or entities that are distributing some cash to businesses like yours. So you're positioned really well. Plus, you're going to know what to do with that money more now, because that money, what we see is companies or businesses that are receiving any kind of money. Let's say it's $2,000. They don't know how to spend it. They don't know how to spend that money, and then they spend it not on the business, not properly. So now you would have a better sense of how to utilize that money to grow your business and turn it into something more than it is now. I'll pause there.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
You got another question, Albert? Last one.
Okay. Most of the question I've summarized them into that question. And
yeah, what about your business? Tell me about your business. I'm going to ask you a question. Tell me what you're doing. So, what's your product and service? Who's your customer? How do you make money? 30 seconds. Go.
Come on.
What's your product and service? Who's your customer? How do you make money? 30 seconds.
Okay. For me, I make money I'm in the group whereby we started the microcredit, and this is the way we make money by borrowing, by encouraging people to access credit in our group, and later they bring back the money taken with the interest. And that interest we involve it in other activities like carpentry and tailoring, and then we earn resources, we earn little money to use in our life from there. And also as we employ other people, they earn, and they earn also, they get better life here in the settlement. I can't say get better life, but they get life at least. They access some basic needs.
Let me ask you this. So is your business, is the revenue growing? Is the demand for your micro loans growing?
Yeah, the revenue is growing as most of people are using our products, our loan, and as most people are getting our products in the fashion design workshop and the carpentry workshop. They are making their window doors and the windows to make their shelters closed. And then this grow our revenue because the income is growing.
You know, so my first thought, Albert, I got a thought for you. I'm going to give you a thought. And I think in Chingwalia, there's two different banking institutions. A couple of them are smaller, and they're focused more on supporting micro loans. have you thought about partnering with any banks to help create that loan to be able to then participate in the revenue that would be generated from those micro loans? So you would in essence be able to tap a larger pool of money and do a revenue share with a bank. That builds the relationship with the bank. You start having really good experiences with your loans or paybacks. The bank's more interested. All of a sudden, that's a mechanism to get more money into your bank account to create more loans directly from you, not necessarily the bank. I'll pause there. Talk to me about what you're doing with banks and how you're partnering with banks.
Okay, yeah, we have tried to partner with, we have tried to see how we can partner with some local banks here, like PPP Bank. But the problem is that the banks here in Uganda doesn't trust mostly refugees, because a refugee can be here today and next time he find he's resorted to the US, to that country, and finally maybe they go back to their respective countries, and then find they still have that challenge in their mind that maybe we can find these people, they may leave and we fail how to get our money.
Yeah, I mean, banks can be difficult. Let's be honest. I advise a number of bank CEOs to this day, and run strategy sessions and for annual retreats for banks. And banks are banks, and part of it is they're regulated, right, by the governments, and so it's not always the bank that's the challenge. It can be the regulations and the requirements they have to follow to avoid any penalties. But also they're trying to protect the money, so they're trying to reduce the risk. What I would do, Albert, I would keep knocking on their doors. I would keep talking to them. Every time you get a chance, say, here's what I'm doing, here's how it's growing. I really want to figure out a way for us to work together. How can we tap into your bank's opportunities here to be able to transfer more money? We have a really good track record with paybacks. We have good clients who are dependable at paying money back, and we've got this kind of average 98%, 99% payback on time. The banks will start paying attention, so you can't give up on the banks. You've got to build a relationship with those bankers. Again, this is for everybody out there. You want to create a relationship with a banker that becomes your friend. You want that banker to be your friend. Some of my best friends are bankers. Why? Because you never know when you'll need a banker. And bankers, when they're your friends, are more willing to give you a character handshake. That's your character. They're willing to go into a relationship. It's not about the contract or the agreement. It's the spirit of the relationship. So my challenge for you, Albert, going forward is build relationships with banks you want to work with in your area, in your neighborhood, and then start working towards identifying ways you can collaborate and work, which would expand your ability to give loans. Again, building that relationship with the bank, which then opens the door for that bank to go, we really like you, Albert, and here's something we can maybe do for you. All of a sudden, you got your funding through the bank by building the relationship with the bank, growing the revenue with the bank as a shared revenue model, and slowly you're creating your own pool of money then to run your own micro loans. This will work and is highly effective. And I've seen it happen before, but you've got to build a relationship and keep working on that, not giving up. Keep knocking on their door. Find that person who says, who's excited about what you're doing, who gets motivated by it, and then just work that relationship over time on a regular, consistent basis. Stop by, say hello, share your progress, your enthusiasm, and where you want to go, and and engage them, enroll them into your vision. And guess what? Most of the time, they'll step up. I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you got it, man. We'll stay in touch, Albert. Thank you very much. It's good seeing you, and say hello to everybody there in Chingwali.
You're welcome. Thank you, to say hello to the team too.
You betcha. Thank you. Bye, Albert. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Amy?
Well, I had a question. So here's my question. First, I want to make sure that I take care of Albert. But do banks everywhere here seem to have relationships with one another? And when I say that, it's like if Albert was to have a good, solid relationship, and for some reason was to be, uprooted from where he's at today, and move to another, nearby region.
He would be relocated, and it would be an official relocation to a permanent home from where he is right now. And usually that takes 10, 12, 15 years. So he's there for a while.
Okay. Well, would a relationship
unusual for them to get out faster? I've done a little research on that. Yeah.
Would a relationship with the banker now be able to be something that, like you and I would say, well, I know Sean Griffin, to someone who, another peer of yours like that.
You're trying to leverage my name or something?
I'm just saying, you could borrow credibility from someone if they trust you, and
well,
that's
what I would do in that situation, Amy, what I would do is I'd want a personal referral. So I wouldn't drop the name, because there's a risk in dropping the name. The person calls up and said, "This person dropped your name. What's the deal?" All of a sudden, the whole thing's screwed over because you didn't talk to me and you're dropping my name. You see what I'm saying? Like, what are you talking about? Or it doesn't matter. We have such a great relationship. Oh yeah, sure. I've told her she can drop the name. Here's what I know about Amy. You see what I'm saying? Like, but I want the personal introduction from the person who's the influencer to that banker. What I can't emphasize this enough. Like, if you take one thing away from today's show, this is the one thing I would take away, besides removing your critical judgmental side. Sorry, I can help it. Is become friends with a banker or multiple bankers. And Amy's right. And they do know each other. At our, I've trained now hundreds of bankers probably on how to mentor, how to be a better mentor, and how to work with business builders. And so I think that, bankers are looking for opportunities to gain customers. That's it. And they want lifetime customers. And so you have to talk to a banker at a banker mindset. And the banker wants deposits or loans. And that's how they make money. Those transactions create cash for the bank. And so they're looking for opportunities to engage with customers that can provide those services and need those services. Business builders and entrepreneurs who are starting a business have a greater probability of a long-term lifetime value, because it's difficult once you're in a bank to get out of a bank. And so this is a sales strategy I would use, and Albert, I would use this if you're still here, to make sure that you're selling and you're communicating your sales to the bankers in a way that's a compelling reason for them to move forward. And that is, I'm going to bring you, and I've got a pipeline of viable loans that then you can secure, and let's do a revenue share. Usually it's 50%. Maybe you can get 60% of that revenue share sometimes from the bank. But banks, they're good at this. And so they're always looking for opportunities. And I think the thing is, again, it's that critical judgmental nature. It's a bank, they're bankers. And so I'm nervous. You get nervous, and they're smarter. They're like doctors, right? Make people uncomfortable. Forget that. They're humans. They're just like you and me. They put their pants on the same way. They go to the bathroom the same way as you and me. There's no difference. So whatever you may have in your head that they're bankers, they wear ties and they're better than you, or that they're more successful than you, wipe that out of your brain. What you want to do is, you're like starting your business. You want to grow your business. Banks are one way to do that. If you're doing micro loans like Albert's doing. If you're doing something else that requires banks, any business requires a bank, pretty much. If you're going to grow your business, create a relationship with your banker. If you have a bank, go find out who the manager is, introduce yourself, have a conversation with them, and continually do that every time you get in there, so that you are now part of their mind. They know who you are. And when you really, really need something, and you're in a situation that now it's not just looking at the flat numbers, it's your character. They're looking at your character, and they're more likely to go forward with a loan with somebody with good character. Amy, we have more questions? That was a good one. This is why we do what we do, everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a good one.
Actually, again, we've got questions that come in from numbers that I never get a name. So they're just WhatsApp numbers, and I have their questions.
Do our text. You can text your questions, 202-642-7089. Clearly don't have that memorized yet.
I'll put it here at the bottom.
Across the bottom there, so there we go. What's up? Or text your questions to 202-642-7089, Or you can send us your videos and 30-second videos that help us with your question if you'd like to do that, and we'll run those here on the show and answer your questions as best as possible.
Okay, here we go. I've got some. You ready?
Find somebody. If I don't know, we'll find somebody who does.
Okay, here we go.
I'm considering asking my family for funding, but I am unable to determine the amount to ask for. How much can I ask for, and what can I give them in return? The old friends, family, fools funding, huh? So here's what I would say. How much? How little? What I want you to think about is how little money, not how much. This is a big difference. How little money do you need, not how much money do you need. There's a difference, because what you're focused on is getting, you can ask your parents, and I don't know where you are in the world. I don't know what the situation with your parents are. Maybe they've got endless supplies of cash and you could ask for any amount you want. I don't know. I'd love to ask that question of you. I'm going to assume that there's not a lot of money in that family, and that this is a stretch, and your parents are going to be, or family members are going to be a little uncomfortable about this. So focus on how little. So if you say you need $25,000, I would challenge you to, this is US dollars, I would challenge you to say, can you do it for $1,000 US dollars? The key here is you want to use that money to start generating revenue as quickly as possible. That's the key. And you want to show your parents that you're going to create that revenue as quickly as possible. And that may be that you keep your job and you're going to use that money from your job for revenue to be able to grow that business. It could be that you're going to be starting to sell your products or services and you start generating some money. It's going to start slow, but it's going to take off over time. You want to show your parents that your family members that you have a strategy. Here's my business model. Here's my time frame. Here, remember, working 1 week, 1 month, 6 month action plans. Show them what you're going to do in that amount of time, where that money is going to go. Be really clear about this money will allow me to move to this place. I'll be able to start generating more money, or it'll position me for additional funding if that's the case and I need more funding. If you can start generating revenue so you don't need that funding, even better. And so I've done this before myself, going back to my 20s and 30s, in times I've leveraged friends and family, and the way that I've been able to do that is to be able to show a compelling strategy, not asking for some outrageous amount, something that's a reasonable amount for my family that wouldn't take them to a place where they were really, really uncomfortable, but it might stretch them or might make them easier for them. But I've always shown them how that money is going to be used. And then I keep them in the loop as I go forward so that they understand where that money is going. Now, your family, you have to be honest with them and clear. They're likely probably never to get that money back. I mean, that's the reality. That's what you have to be honest about. Like, this is a risk. They're here to support you, to empower you, to grow as a human, to reach a higher level of agency, your own agency, 100% agency, to be able to create your own career path. And that even if this doesn't work, you're still going to take the lessons you've learned and apply them going forward. I have an agreement with Seema, my wife. We've started a college fund, which just boggles my brain. And we've agreed that that fund could be used for Zane to start businesses if he didn't want to go to school, or if that wasn't his path, his choice. I'm not pushing him to start businesses, but I am saying that I'm honest, like, about these things. And when it comes to raising money from your family, so Zane's set up when he gets older, he can see to start the business. So if he asks for the money, it's there to do that. It comes out of a college fund. What I would say, and that's totally new behavior for me, everybody, brand new behavior. I've never, ever done that before. And so make sure your parents understand, here's what I'm going to do with the money. I'm asking for this little amount. And then also, here's how I'm going to spend the money. Here's how the money is going to be used. And here's how it's going to grow. And then you want to keep them updated on progress. Your odds of getting funding from them go up. But again, how little money do you need? Not how much money. This is a key differentiator, because how little money do you need to start generating revenue to grow your business? Not how much money do I need. There's two different things, particularly with family, friends, or fools. How can I determine an equity percentage versus funding? Well, so Okay, so let me say this. Whenever I start a business, a for-profit business, I issue generally 3 to 4 million shares. 3 to 4 million shares. I immediately set aside 5%, 5% of those shares, and then what I leverage those shares for are engaging or enrolling people to work for me. So that can be distribution of shares to over time. So I may have somebody who comes on board. I may not have a lot of money, cash, but I've got shares, and I can say, okay, I'll pay you 6,000 shares a month. This comes out of the 5%, right? 6,000 shares a month. And those 6,000 shares that you get each month will vest after 6 months. So what I've done is I've created a mechanism that makes sure if they're terminated or if it doesn't work out within that 6 months, I don't have to deliver any shares to them because it didn't vest. So it vests over 6 months. If I'm looking for funding and I'm just a startup, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be prepared to distribute 35% of my business for initial angel funding. It's just going to be what it's going to be. I try to create, if I'm fundraising, and I haven't done this for quite some time, but when we train other people for fundraising, your team is a part of the value. So I can determine my valuation through my team. And if anybody is super experienced, let's say I was on the team, the valuation goes up dramatically. Based upon the market and the possibility, the valuation goes up. If I'm generating revenue, the more revenue I'm generating, showing a customer growth, I can then say, okay, 10 times revenue would be this. This is a valuation of my company. The key thing is in the beginning, and let's say you're asking for $50, $100, $250,000, and you're going to be distributing 30 to 35% of your business. That gives you some sense of what percentage you're going to need to distribute or you're going to have to give up for those investors. I may suggest anybody who's really doing that, first of all, you need a lawyer because a lawyer is the only one who can help you put together the term sheet and the offer letters that go to the investors. When you are running an investment and you're trying to go for money, remember it's out of your control, but you need to be 100% focused on that funding and closing those deals. When you have a funder who's hot, if you have somebody who's excited about funding your business, you want to close that as fast as possible. Get them to sign on the dotted line right now. Here you go, sign. My mother talked about this, getting people to sign right then and there, particularly funders. Once you collect that money, then once you get all those funders, you close the deal. Again, lawyers are going to have to be part of that process. So it's not just a simple, unless it's friends and family, then you can have a simple document you can find on the internet, on Google, and then go get that money. But again, I would be looking at, when I'm looking at valuation, it's people on the team, history, market size, any revenue, multiples of revenue that you're already creating can prove that there's a market for that. And then you want to be completely 100% focused on the fundraising at the point you're going after fundraising, because that is all you can really focus on to get those deals closed. And then after funding, you go back to your business. So funding and fundraising is extremely disruptive to the operation of a business if you're currently in business. But valuations are determined by the people on the team, history of those people and their success rate, how much revenue you're generating, the potential for revenue, and then the speed of growth you can get. Again, when I start any business that might have any potential for any business, actually, when I start a for-profit business, about 4 million shares, 5% to the side for employees or people, not employees, contractors, people who would work for you. You can use those shares as money and then distribute that over time. Again, investing over time. Okay, got a lot of investor questions here. When should I start looking for investors? How can I determine if my business fit the investment profile of specific venture capital? All right. I'm going to remind everybody, less than 1% of all businesses globally, 0.8% receive any kind of traditional funding, venture capital funding, bank funding, angel funding. So your odds are not the greatest. Your best bet to move forward and not hold you back is to generate revenue, to bootstrap your business to a place where you can show there's enough revenue and there's enough market to grow this business. Then you become more fundable. So the more revenue you create, the more fundable you become. Now, if you are positioning yourself, venture capitalists and investors are very narrow niche. So they focus in biotech, they focus in healthcare, they focus in agriculture, they focus in fintech, they focus in the specific areas that their COVID-19 solutions. A lot of those have popped up, right? And so you're going to see, first of all, you have to determine what is your niche and then find those investors that are focused on investing within your particular area. You need to show the most compelling reason for your investment, the most compelling opportunity to grow that business. And you start with team. I'm going to say it again, like your team has to be strong. If you don't have any track record starting or running a business, growing a business, you got to bring people on that have some experience running businesses. If you've been an employee for a business or executive, you're a little older, you have some experience, that is viable and can translate over to your business. If you're younger, it gets a little more harder. You want to bring in some senior people. When I was starting my first businesses, when in my 20s in Silicon Valley, I brought in gray toppers. That is people with gray hair. Now I are one. And that was how I was able to compensate when I was 21, 22 years old. I would have a 54-year-old, a 60-year-old with me walking into a room, and we would start pitching and doing whatever we were doing to grow our business or develop and raise some money. I always had senior people with me who had great experience, who gave me greater credibility and gave us all greater credibility because they were standing there strong together. So if you're younger, you want a gray topper, find older people to come on board your business to give you credibility faster. And then make sure you understand what it is that's going to help you become more compelling to the investors. And remember, the investor has one goal, that is to make money for the people who put the money into their fund. So that if they don't feel that this will make money, then the odds are not very good you're going to receive any funding. And you don't want to be so extreme that you're over exaggerating how far you go. So there's like this balance in this window that's compelling. And remember, you only get one shot, and you got to get that right. And every time you get no, you get closer to somebody else saying yes. And we learned that yesterday with my mother and sales and as well. But be as prepared as you can going in for those funding. Each time you go in, you want to be as prepared as possible, and you want to focus your message on what they want, not what you want, what they want. You want funding, that's great. But what they want is a return on that investment. You have to show them how they're going to get that return on their investment and why your business idea and your business model is the next big thing that's going to help them get 100-time return on their investment, because that's what they're looking for. And if you can't show a path to 100-time plus return on investment, you're probably not qualified for a venture capitalist. I would also, second thing, wherever you are, I would find investment-ready programs that are available in your network, in your community, in your country, that would allow you to work with professionals who then can help you position and make sure that you're financially ready for an investor. You need a lawyer. It's just, that's number one, right? If you're going to go raise money, you got to have a lawyer. That lawyer is there going to be helping advise you and putting together documents and papers in a way that the investors, the venture capitalists, understand and feel confident in the offer sheets and the term sheets that are being presented to them. We are working with an investor, and he is requesting us to provide a detailed plan of how we are planning to structure the investment. Any help? Okay. Also, the investor asked if we could take Bitcoins. Can we accept those as an investment? Interesting. Okay. So question one. Can you go back to that for a second? My brain got hung up on Bitcoin. Okay. So here's what when I put myself in your shoes, as someone, and let's say I'm going to assume that this is the first time you've gone out for funding, what you want to try and think about is a convertible loan. So what that is that when you go into this relationship, you're offering, and this reduces the risk for the investor and increases their odds of saying yes. So you're trying to reduce the friction and get them to yes. A convertible loan is a good option for this, and here's how it works. One, you're distributing those 35%. That 35% goes to, right off the top, goes to that investor. They just bought that. Let's say it's $100,000. Let's say they've got now 1.5 million shares is their 35%. What happens is you start paying back as the revenue grows in the business. You start paying back that investor, and you're literally buying back those shares over, let's say, a 3 or 5 year period. 5-year period. First 2 years, no payments. You're using that money. Third, fourth, fifth year, you start paying back that loan. This is based upon the projections that you're going to actually succeed in growing the revenue that you say you're going to grow. At the end of those 5 years, they may keep 5% of the company. You've bought back 30% of those shares, so they may be left with like 250,000 shares. They've got their money back with some interest. They've reduced their risk, and you got the cash. And so convertible loans are really, really effective at the beginning stages, particularly early angel investment stages of businesses between $50,000 and let's say $250,000. Highly effective because now it reduces that risk, and the investor feels, at least inside, they feel like they've created a safety mechanism to be able to make that investment work. So I'd be looking at a convertible loan. I would be looking at if it's an angel in first round, you're looking at 30, 35, 40% of the business. I would be leery of anybody who starts going more, because that investor may not have your best interest at heart. So you want to be interviewing. Here's the second thing. You want to be interviewing those investors just as much as they're interviewing you, because you're going to go into a relationship with them. And once that is signed on the line, and once the money's transferred and it sits in your bank account, you have shook hands with that person. You're now married. And your business model became their business model. And they're going to be interested in making sure this business grows, because that's their hard-earned cash. So you want to be making sure that the character of that person is strong. If somebody comes to you and says, I want 60, 70%, this is the first initial angel investment stage, I'm going to have to ask myself, wow, man, that's pretty serious. And I would start asking, what do I get for that beyond the money? So what you want to do is look beyond money. Money is one thing, but what kind of networks do they have? Who do they know, in particularly, who can help you grow your business so that they can introduce you to? Can they introduce you to buyers, people who would buy your product or service? Do they have people who can help come on board and help you grow your business? These are values beyond the cash. So I'd be looking for an investor who doesn't just bring cash, but also brings networks and other resources that they're willing to plow into the business. And it's not just an investment for them to have some control over your company or feel like they're important, which a lot of investors do. And then you also want to make sure that investor has some training on how to be an investor, because there are a lot of investors out there who have a lot of money but have no clue what it means to invest. And then they can help make it more difficult for your business by getting too involved and feel like they have the right to because they invested in your business. So back to the original question, convertible loan is my best advice to you right now at the beginning stage. Or you could do a crowdfunding with nobody has any ownership. But if the investor is asking you for more detail, you want to provide, remember, they want a return on their investment. That's number one. How are they going to get that return? How are you going to grow the cash? How are you going to grow the business so that they know that at the end of this 5 or 7 year period, there's some kind of return transition that gets them back their money, plus generally investors like 100% or more return on their investment.
So to be clear, the Bitcoin question.
I even got there. That was my next one. So, yeah, you can take Bitcoin. It's cash. Turn it into cash. Or you spend a quarter of that Bitcoin and turn it, you leverage that cash in different ways. But Bitcoin, any of those kind of currencies that are out there that you can turn into cash, particularly Bitcoin, you could end up making more money, because I wouldn't spend. If I got some funding in Bitcoin, I would be distributing and selling that Bitcoin only when I had to distribute payrolls or some expense, because particularly today, if you're watching Bitcoin, it's going up, right? And the ideal situation for Bitcoin is a very chaotic world. Oh my gosh, are we in that right now? Then Bitcoin has the potential to go up because it's not held by all these traditional rules and regulations. It's managed through itself, right? And that literally you could take that Bitcoin and then let it sit there and only sell those Bitcoins as you need the cash. And it's possible you would actually come out ahead and make some money. So I'd be really smart. And this goes back to having really good team members, an account manager, somebody who understands, or an advisor who helps you understand, okay, now you've got these 100 Bitcoins, 200 Bitcoins. Now what are you going to do? with those, and I wouldn't cash them all at once for sure, because unless you saw a trend where it was diving down. Right now the trend is up. So I think my wife and I own like a quarter of a Bitcoin right now. So I don't know.
Do you have time for just one more?
Amy, I've always got time.
Okay.
This is why we're here. I love this. More about. Did you save all these up for me, Amy? A question by a potential investor is your valuation in line with the industry in the country or region. How can we determine that? Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. Uncle Google is your friend, right? Search how to create a valuation for my company, put whatever specific industry you're in, and then see what comes back. How valuations are created. Are the people on the team, do they have experience starting a business? Do they have an exit? If they have an exit, even more important. So a strong team, critical, and investors are going to look for that, the ability to execute on that business model. 2, a compelling business model that shows that they're going to get a return on their investment that's going to be 100%, 100 times plus. You got to think like the investor. They want their money back. So you got to be able to show them how you're going to grow that. And then 3, the value you're creating in the marketplace. And then if you have attraction and have customers, even better. So that's why I'm always driving people to create revenue now, not days, not weeks, not months, now. How quick can you create that revenue and show and prove that there's customers buying your product or service? That positions you better for funding and increases your valuation as well. There are other things that can be part of it. The overall, your advisors, if you have anybody who's a special, again, it's team people. The team people are the number one value you can create, particularly in the beginning. If you have no track record of building a business or any kind of exit strategy, find a gray topper, somebody who's older, could bring on your team to help give you that credibility and that comfort to the investors that they're going to get their money back in 100 times that investment, because they also know the odds are they're never going to get that money back. That's real, right? Their odds are. That's why investors spread out a lot of investments, because at some points those 1 or 2 0.8% that deliver back the big returns, while the rest of them flounder or go away. So I'm not saying I buy into that. I believe I can do anything. I believe you can do anything. I know you can, and so you will. But you also have to put it in a frame of reference that there's a really good chance that this won't work historically, statistically. So therefore, you've got to overcome those odds and make sure that investor believes that you are the one who can overcome those odds versus someone else that they might invest in. And when I think about investors, and I'll put this out there, and I know a number of them, they're reviewing 100, 200, 300 business models a year, right? Let's say some maybe more. And they're investing in 5, 10, 12 of those businesses. So if you are one of the ones who receive funding, that is not the goal. You did not win. You did not win the lottery. You are not super successful. It just means it got harder, because now you got to perform on what you've been saying you were going to perform on. So funding is not the goal. Funding is a vehicle and a leverage point to get you to where you want to go. But once you receive funding, it just got harder. Now you got to work really hard. You got to hire more people, and you got to start meeting those milestones that you said you were going to achieve when you got that funding. So I just want to make sure you understand that funding is not the goal. You are not a huge success if you receive or secure any funding. It just means that you got a lot more work now in front of you, and it's not just your business anymore. That investor has now become a member of your team. So make sure that you interview those investors as much as they're interviewing you, because that's a marriage you're going into, and you want to make sure that you can work with those people and they have the kind of character that's there to help support aspiring, fledgling new businesses grow. And there are plenty of them out there, but I say that because I see too many entrepreneurs get too excited about the money and then don't think about the ramifications of what that means to take that money once they get that money, and the kind of relationship they're going into with the people that they're starting to get an investment from. Okay. Amy, maybe we don't have questions around funding so much.
I know. It was just a really all about funding day. It just,
Yeah. You set this up for me, huh? That's okay. Get it out of the way.
And they seem to be really important, a burning question. And
everybody wants it, all right? It's the funding. And I think
you go back to the same situation. revenue.
I'm a broken record. So, every day of my life, pretty much.
I think it's important.
And but it's got to sink in, and I don't think it sinks in. I think that what I see is people are more focused on funding. Funding is the focus, not realizing to get to the funding, you got to create the revenue and the business and the model and the team to get there. And so there's no shortcut, everyone. And anybody who's throwing money around, they want their money back in 100 to 200, 300 times that investment. And, in some cases they're getting 1,000, 2,000 times. That's really skewing their perspective because they want now that, right? 1,000% return. So 1,000 times return, pardon me. So I'm going to go back to, before we close this out, where we started, and that is overcoming, at least myself. And I think that we've been hearing from people that there's this inner chatter in your brain, this negative talk, this sabotaging talk. Part of that is around critical thinking, critical nature, critical against myself or others, and judgmental against myself and others. And that those two areas are holding us back. And so I'm making a commitment today to everyone that I'm going to remove and release my critical thinking and judgmental thinking that undermines my ability to be as successful or help as many people as possible and enroll and motivate the teams around me. I commit to doing that from this minute forward. I hope you'll think about those areas that you want to improve and that you yourself will also make commitments and start taking the steps to change the behaviors that will help you reach your full potential. Okay, let's do it. Day 18 done. Oh my gosh, 18 days. How did that happen? We're on the home stretch. I wonder what's next after 31 days. I'm not saying it. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Same Patitude time, same Patitude place. Thanks for being here, everybody.
You got to never ever give up. Never ever give up. Never ever give up. Never ever give up.
Believe in yourself and you'll go far.